I saw a meme on Facebook a few months ago where the author expressed a sincere desire to live in precedented times. In other words, the unprecedented nature of the last year's events felt overwhelming, even burdensome. As we turned the clock from secular year 2020 to 2021, I understood that sentiment all too well, and I wanted to share people's optimism that the turning of the calendar would mean a turning of fate. Unsurprisingly, the first week of 2021 has challenged this arbitrarily assigned optimism. Between skyrocketing infection and death rates from COVID and a violent assault on the Capitol building, the bad news seems only to be escalating as the calendar year changes. I'll admit, I just want to curl up and reread a good book, to lose myself in the drama while knowing how it ends, because the pages are dog-eared and worn from years spent seeking comfort in its narrative. I want to plumb the depths of a good old book to seek wisdom for today. Now, while my personal favorite genre is historical romance, that's actually not the kind of book I have in mind. I will instead join the Jewish people in moving from Genesis to Exodus as we progress through our annual practice of reading the Torah section by section each week. We can take comfort as we read about the anguished cries of the Israelite people under the tyranny of Pharaoh, because we know how this story ends. We know that God will hear their cries, and through a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, through signs and wonders, will take them from slavery to freedom. We know that the narrative of the Torah will end at the border of the land of Israel. Those of us who've read the sequel know that the Israelite people, the Jewish people, will face many ups and downs as they settle in, rule over, and ultimately lose control of the land of Israel. We know that in spite of their frequent betrayals of the law to which they have pledged themselves, that God will never abandon them completely. We know that the sequels to this book are still being written. I'm less sure how to deal with reality outside of these sacred pages. What do we do with the story that hasn't been written yet and whose outcome is uncertain? There's a concept called magical thinking, which is usually used in the context of adolescence and risky behavior, but which I believe applies to adults far more than we generally admit. Magical thinking is the belief that bad things won't happen to us, that they are reserved for other people, that we're protected, that we don't need to do the hard work or make the choices to increase the chances of a good outcome. Magical thinking is believing that the narrative of our personal or national novel will have a happy ending, even if we don't confront our history of racial injustice or notice how policing is applied differently depending on the group involved. It means believing that there are lines that no one will actually try to cross. It means believing that we will get through this pandemic unscathed, even if we don't make changes to our activities. As we move into Shabbat and prepare to read about the Israelites' descent into slavery, we're comforted by knowing how that story ends. This Shabbat, my family will also be marking the 7th anniversary of my husband's near-fatal fall from a height of 2 stories. 7 is a sacred number in Judaism. It's the year of rest and respite, the Shabbat when we step out of our daily grind and into the sacred space, the sabbatical year when we let the land rest. Could this sabbatical year be a respite for us from the constant anxiety, wondering what the next bad thing that may be coming? Frankly, it probably shouldn't be. That anxiety provides a constant counterpoint to the temptation of magical thinking. It reminds us that yes, bad things do happen to good people. It's a motivator more than a stressor because we choose to make it so. As we mark this sacred 7th anniversary, we watch the country struggle with the limitations of individualism, and we fight to bring forward and personally live a sense of communal responsibility. We take comfort in the defined cycle of the Jewish year, and we match it with the uncertainty of our daily march forward in time. I believe in an optimistic future. I know that the future will not write itself as the narrative we want it to be. Nor do we have the luxury of writing on a blank slate. I remember and am comforted by the words of the poet Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, and, if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Happy New Year and Shabbat Shalom.